Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mike Bisaccio. I'm Director of Marketing and Communications with Cabells. So I'm thrilled to be here today to just go over database. One thing I'm going to do right at the start is I'm going to stop my camera. I think it helps with the speed of my screen share a little bit, I've found. Hopefully everybody can see the page where I'm at now. Like Shannon said, any questions she'll relay, please, that's what we'd love. These sessions really are designed to help make sure everyone is kind of realizing the full benefits of the platform. There are no real tricks to learn, but we definitely have some tips and things of that nature I don't know if everybody can see I'm moving the panel. Okay, so I'll just kind of jump right in at the beginning and kind of go over the basics, and maybe we'll do a few searches and I'll show a few things to look for. And again, I'm sure some questions will come up so we can address those. So this is what we call our guided search page. Now, some things are a little bit different depending on the subscriber and what they have access to. So I have been given a login for just predatory reports, which is what we're seeing here. So I don't know exactly what you all see once you're at this page. Is again what we call our guided search page. It's probably, hopefully, something like this. Having access to predatory reports, we see all journals. In this case, is all our predatory journals. We're currently listing 17,416. We also have that information here at the predatory shortcut. First, just to go over this screen, in general, we have just the search button. Anytime you want to click this, and this comes into play, unfortunately, some of our other links take us away from this database page rather than open in a new window. So this is a handy button to remember. Our process has some great links, I think, that have some useful information. We'll go over a bit of these. I actually took the liberty of clicking on this separately. It brings us to cabells.com. And like I said, I will show you because we can get back. If I click on predatory criteria, unfortunately, it takes us away from the database. Not the greatest thing. Usually the back button works. Will bring you back to the database. But if you do find yourself at the criteria, you can click this search button. Like we said, well, it's the word search, and it'll bring you back to the database. So that's just right away before we get too involved. This is also a handy link to user guides. If we click here, this is bringing us to a user guide with on predatory reports. Here we have a little bit of a table of contents. You can go if you have a specific question. This can be handy. We also have embedded videos, which I just want to show. We have a YouTube channel with videos like this. Some videos down here might be helpful, but we have all kinds of videos. So keep an eye on our YouTube channel. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to point out right away. Again, so I don't get lost. And we can see here the user guide, unfortunately, took me away from the database, which isn't great. I'm going to go back here and click search. I brought that up. These links should default to opening in a new window. But we're going to get a look at the criteria maybe a bit later. We'll discuss them just to kind of go over a little bit about our evaluation process. I think it's helpful to know a little bit about that. This brings up a contact page just to contact us with any questions. We love questions, comments, feedback, anything. Search box, pretty much what you would expect. We'll get a look at this in a bit. We can search by title, discipline, or keyword, ISSN. If we have it, we'll see how this plays out a little bit later. And again, right here is how we jump to the database. So with 17,000 journals, it can be a bit overwhelming. Usually we're taking some action. This is not exactly a database you might just browse. Certainly on the predatory side, it's really about identifying, whether or not a journal is included in our database. By far, that's the largest use case we have. Researcher, administrator, whoever comes across a journal, they just want to check it out. A lot of times, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's received emails from a journal soliciting an article that may or may not be anywhere in your area. This is very helpful to be able to right away search for the journal. And we'll go over a few of the identifying points we have for each journal card. First, I think it's helpful to go over what we're looking at. So again, just to get into the database, you can click either all journals, predatory. It's going to bring you to the predatory reports. Same thing, all journals. We're operating within the same universe of journals, whether you're in the all journals tab or predatory reports. We have the 17,000 journals. Very briefly, what we're looking at on what we call our journal summary cards are now these kind of work in tandem with our verified journal cards. A lot of this, a lot of this design kind of plays on to the design for our verified journal listings to make it apparent this is different. So a lot of these elements are present in the verified journal cards, and that's kind of why this is set up like this. But briefly, this heat map gives us a little preview of the violation categories, levels of severity. This is from an accessibility standpoint. I've mentioned variations in color aren't the greatest. The top of this pop-up window, publication practices, is a darker red. That notes a severe violation. The yellow, access and copyright, is a minor violation. And at the bottom, peer review, I can't move my mouse here because it'll disappear. At the bottom, peer review, that's a moderate violation. I guess that moderate shade of red. Again, we'll get a better look. This can just give you a bit of a preview. Predatory badge, just to show. Now you don't have to worry about that, but all searches normally search both our verified and predatory databases. So you might have in one return predatory journals next to legitimate journals. You can easily separate those out, but to make further sure. So again, this seems redundant now, but we like to make sure everyone knows they're looking at a predatory journal. Publisher, we don't evaluate publishers, we evaluate individual journals. I think that's an important distinction between our platform and some others out there. Maybe we certainly, if we have a journal such as Omics right here, very prominent, I guess you would say, predatory publisher. We obviously have a good idea. Journals published by Omics, they were in recent years found had a $50 million judgment against them in federal court. So they're, a proven predatory publisher. We have an idea their journals are likely predatory, but we just don't, evaluate publishers. We're looking at each journal individually. That's one thing, but we do include the publisher, of course, for identification and search purposes. Title of the journal, of course. This date here is the date of our first review, initial review and inclusion. This date comes into play not very often, but sometimes we'll be contacted by, say, a researcher who published in this journal unknowingly, and perhaps they published in it in 2020. They are able to say at the time of publication, maybe it wasn't known or wasn't listed on our database. A lot of institutions require that their researchers publish in journals that are not included in predatory reports. So sometimes this date comes into play. That's just one reason. Really, we just want to record the date it was included. We do not review each publication in predatory reports each year. That is not to say we list these journals and then forget about them. They're listed as predatory. We have an appeals process in place. These publishers, ideally, they're looking at their journal, the violations we've found, and we could use this as a roadmap to clean up their operation, so to speak. And we just do not find that is the way publishers are using that. We've had no successful appeals. We have had fewer than 10 appeals, none successful. But ideally, they could use, if it's just a matter of needing the time and information to clean up their processes, we are providing them that information. It's just not how it's being used. But that date is the date of our initial review. Odds are, either through looking at this publisher or just in the course of our work, we do go back over these journals, but we don't have a set procedure to kind of check in with each one. With 17,000 journals and growing, that would just be too difficult. The heat map, what this also gives is a little bit of an indication on the number of violations and the different categories. So you can see we have some different layouts. It's just kind of an extra level. You can see these journals have large number of violations. That's about it on the summary page. We can, I think, jump in. I'll just pick a card here. So some things we have really to make identifying these journals easier. This database is not separated format, not searchable, if you will, by disciplines, but we do include the information here for search purposes, identification purposes. We'll see how this comes into play. Launch date can be useful, and ISSN. So an ISSN, of course, isn't a mark of legitimacy for a journal. I think all a journal really has to show is that they've published something. When they apply for an ISSN, they can have one distributed. Last count, about 60 journals, 60% of the journals in predatory reports claim some ISSN, whether it's made up, actual legitimate ISSN, which is often the case. Occasionally, they'll just kind of take, copy, hijack, if you will, an ISSN from a legitimate journal. We can see some instances of that. But we include that. That comes in very handy, of course, for identification purposes, to make sure you're looking at the correct journal. This here is a little summary of the violations. Again, hovering over publication practices with the darker red shows me that this is a severe violation in this category. These are minor violations, again, severe. So that can give me an idea along with the number of violations in each category. This is helpful as well. And this gives us the opportunity to open the link in a new tab, which I just right-clicked on this criteria rather than click on it, and I'll show it takes us away from our search, which I find frustrating. So if you right-click on this, open in a new tab, it will open the link in a new tab. And I'll keep this open because I think it's worthwhile having a look at the criteria. But right here on the card, we can link to the version of the criteria this journal was reviewed under. We're currently in the process of revising, updating the criteria. Version 2.0 should be finished hopefully by the end of the year, released early next year. Again, we'll get a closer look at that. Clicking here on the violations tab just gives us a different view of the violations broken down into categories. So within publication practices, these are the behaviors, our evaluation uncovered. And in these different categories, we have it listed. We can also sort this by severity. So we're looking at the most severe violations up top. This is all just to kind of give us a bit more context if we're interested in kind of really, understanding what this journal's up to, which can help us when, evaluating quote unquote journals, on our own. If we maybe haven't reviewed the journal yet, don't have it listed, you just have questions, understanding the types of things we look for. And then also what I think is very useful is we link to these journals. Now, again, with 17,000 journals, I check these links all the time, and I've not checked this one, so we'll see. They usually are functional, like this one. Occasionally, these links become, defunct for whatever reason. They lose the domain, whatever reason. We do check these. I think this is a really great way to, again, if you receive an email or something from this journal, having the website linked to right here. This also, what I like being able to do is look at the violations that we found. Then you can go to the journal itself, kind of see them, in action, and it'll give you a good idea of things to look for. Like I said, going forward, maybe when looking at journals we have not yet evaluated. That's about, I'm trying to make sure just I cover all the basics on the card, and I want to leave some time for questions. I think in terms of the journal card, we'll probably see more as we go along. So we can look at a few of the search. I'm just seeing there was something I thought to mention. Well, I guess this might be a good time before we move past it to look at the criteria. Just a few things I like to note. We don't have to spend a lot of time in these. Again, these are available at cabells.com directly from the database. You can, whoops, we need to be on the overview tab. You can link to them right here. So basically with our criteria, these are designed to make sure new journals journals from developing countries, journals that are just a lower relative quality, though they are not included in predatory reports for those reasons. Any journal that is listed in predatory reports has earned it. So our criteria are weighted based on level of severity. These behaviors here, these criteria here, the formatting on this page, these are a little to be desired. We've revamped our website, which is what we're looking at, Cabells.com. It's much better now, but again, some formatting work to come. These severe behaviors here and these categories, integrity, peer review, these are all severe violations, so are weighted more heavily. A journal with 2, 3, 4 of these severe violations, that can bring it up or bring it down to the level of being a predatory journal. So these are weighted criteria. Here we have moderate violations in these same categories. These are weighted less heavily than the severe violations, of course. And down here we have minor. So a new journal with maybe just a bad website, some bad spelling, dead links, what are considered relatively minor violations, that will not be enough to have the journal designated as predatory. They are certainly red flags that, further evaluation is probably warranted, but this is designed so, again, some journals are just newer, finding their footing, whatever the reason. English might not be the first language of the editors of the site. So these are all things that aren't, they're certainly taken into consideration. Things like that are not going to have a journal included in predatory reports. So that's just really a quick note. We have basically a scoring system with scores attached to the behaviors. When a journal reaches a certain threshold, it's included in predatory reports. It's a completely discrete evaluation process from our verified journal evaluations. So it's not like we review a journal and it's thrown in either Journalytics or predatory reports. It's a discrete process that we have an idea either through our own research, through word of mouth with the community, that these publications warrant evaluation for possible inclusion on our database. That's just a bit in the criteria. We can have a look at a few searches. We are always working, I am always working, bringing up problems, issues, thoughts on our search process. So any feedback on that, I'm always love and I can take back to our development team. There is not too many tricks, I guess you could say. If anything, our search logic is overly inclusive. What we don't want, especially on the predatory side, is to have a journal listed and not discoverable, not easily discoverable. We want to make sure if someone is looking for a journal and we have it listed, they're going to find it. So first, if you have, I'm just going to should not have picked the longest journal title. If you have a journal's title and you type in that journal, that's fine. It's going to be your first return. As we can see, I've got 16,000 results. I've tried this many, many times. The journal that you're looking for is always the top return. Kind of like a Google search engine might work. You're going to get additional returns. If that's not something you want, it might be a bit antiquated, but throwing, I knew I clicked that. Throwing a journal title, is it going to delete? That right there is good example of why it's annoying that those links bring you off the database. If you put a title in quotation marks, you're going to perform a title level search for this exact title. So if you don't want, if you want to try to narrow the search down to just one journal title, you can do that by throwing in quotation marks. That's just kind of a bit about there. Same thing with, let's see if we have an ISSN here. So if you have an ISSN, that's a great way, probably the best way. Some journals are just similarly titled to cause confusion. Most likely, if you have an ISSN, you can enter that, search for that, and you'll have a one-to-one match 99% of the time. In some rare instances where you might see a journal with the same 4 digits, either at the beginning or end of the ISSN, excuse me, you might get an additional return. That does not happen in the vast majority of cases. So an ISSN is going to give you a one-to-one match. I mentioned earlier keywords. So this database is not formatted, structured, separated out by disciplines. But if I knew, say I just want to search chemistry, whether I want an idea of the journals within chemistry that are predatory. Again, usually our biggest use case is trying to find a specific journal if we have it listed, but keyword searches, and why I point this out, so our first returns are going to have chemistry in the title. But if I move down the list here on the last page, something like this, now where we're at, and I'd just like to point this out, this is where the discipline information comes into play. So chemistry is here. So now it's our logic ranks journals with chemistry in the title higher. So that's why if you go here, you're seeing journals with chemistry in the title. But as we go further down the list, we're going to see journals without necessarily chemistry in the title, but it will be included in the disciplines. So it's kind of just how the keyword searches. It's really, with the predatory journals, we don't have, citation data, things like that. So there's not quite as much information to filter by, search by, but usually with the title, IS and or ISSN and or a keyword, again, trying to find a specific journal, spelling would help. With a keyword is a bit difficult. So if I just have the keyword biology, I do have 350 journals. So having something more to go on, whether it's an ISSN or something like that, can help. But even if you're just trying to identify a journal, and if you know the publisher or something like that, even just a keyword can help. That's one thing. If you want to get rid of that, you have to clear it, click search again. So I'm trying to see, I wanted to make sure I left some time. We've really seen the basics of the journal cards, a little bit about the search process. Are there any questions or on anything I've covered or maybe haven't covered yet?
Yeah, Michael, we do have a couple questions. One question that I have going through this is looking at this list of journals. If I find one that maybe I would like to share with a colleague, is there an easy way to do that?
There is not, and that's a question we get a lot. So basically, to export maybe either one listing or multiple listings. So we currently don't. Historically, we've had certain things that could help that, various APIs. Now with our updated platform, basically, and I mean, this has been, I don't know how familiar every one may have been with kind of the previous iteration of predatory reports, but this platform, and there are a lot of reasons for the change. We have a medical platform now, so we've undergone a lot of changes. We currently have nothing in place to do what you mentioned. Now, that is always something we kind of watched and don't really make it a very intuitive, I guess, obvious process, mainly to protect our data. We have found over the years, obviously the methods have changed, but the ways of kind of data scraping, exporting data, we're obviously, and not necessarily for our subscribers, but for trials through other things like that. So some of this, I think, is due to protection of the data. That being said, what I would do is kind of just, what is it, shift window and S, I guess, to pull a screenshot type of thing. Like I would do something like this to just kind of copy a card to send an image. But in terms of sending dynamic links or data from the database to share with someone else is currently not possible. That's something we hear often. So I suspect we will be coming up, with ways to do that. But we haven't, I guess, figured out a safe, and this is something I don't know much about, but I think part of the challenge has been figuring up, a safe from a data integrity or data protection standpoint. So currently that is not something we can do.
Okay, thanks so much. That's good to know. The next question we have is about, I believe it's about the criteria that you clicked on earlier.
Sure.
And this person can correct me if I'm reading their question wrong. But we're wondering just about the criteria and maybe how Cabells has determined the criteria and how you ordered it under different types of different severity. Was there any specific process that you can tell us about how that was determined?
Sure, yeah. So in some form or another, I guess we've been evaluating journals for over 40 years, really not to the extent we do now. Cabells, long story short, Cabells originally started as a business journal directory. As we've grown over the years, on the legitimate side, extending that to different disciplines, academic and then medical disciplines, and then in 2017 establishing predatory reports. A lot of our evaluation process methods, things we look out for, are in a way kind of the inverse of, I think if I scroll again, I'm still getting to know this page. Yeah, are a lot of ways the inverse of our journal selection. Now that's very much an oversimplification, but these, not to get too into it, are down here. This link is also up top. Yeah, journal selection right here. They're also at the bottom, not to fly around like a lunatic. But so these are our journal selection guidelines on the legitimate Journalytics side of our platform. In many ways, the predatory criteria are kind of the inverse of not just those guidelines, but just our experiences through the years. Our journals team lead is Kathleen Berriman, who's actually been with us for, I think, close to 10 years now. So she is very well, versed in our evaluation process on both the on the legitimate side, and she basically established, designed with help, of course, designed our evaluation process on the predatory side. So a great deal of it comes kind of from our knowledge of the legitimate behaviors and standard industry accepted practices. So our knowledge of that in many ways guided the development of these behaviors. Certainly over the years, we've collaborated with, years ago, Jeffrey Beal, who some might be familiar with Beal's List, which was kind of like an early, not version of this, but an early inspiration for something like this. There are several key differences between our platform, very large key differences. Some of it was generated through talks with Jeffrey in the beginning discussion, and as well as various librarians, consultants we brought on board to kind of go over not just the behaviors and things we're looking for, but also how to ensure that we weren't, like I mentioned earlier, including journals that, one, not just to tarnish the reputation of the journal, but also, of course, open our company up to open to troubles, under legal troubles, whatever trouble that might be down. We are calling these publications predatory. We're listing them here. Like I said, we're now over 17,000. We've had almost no trouble as a result, and that, I think, is because our evaluation process is thorough. Like I said, if these journals are on included in predatory reports, they've earned it. So it was kind of, I think it was first born of our knowledge of what legitimate, verified, quality journals are doing. And then as predatory journals kind of became a thing, and we, again, we launched in 2017, but years before that, we were evaluating them, finding, the same things that we were looking for. So it was kind of, I guess, the combination of all of those, certainly talking to leaders in academic publishing, who are still, studying predatory publishing and learning new things and the new methods. And that's why I am very glad, I'll be very glad when version 2.0 is launched. As we can see, it's been a few years. So, as what we are looking for as we document, this is publicly available, our criteria. So predatory publishers, and not just from our information, they are learning what we're looking for, and not just us, other outlets searching for predatory journals. They kind of know what we're looking for. They know what's obvious. So they kind of are trying to clean up their act, so to speak. So as that happens, our evaluation process and our guidelines and our criteria will also evolve along with it. So it's kind of a long way to say, yeah, it's kind of a lot of different things have fed into it, but we're careful with it. Not mostly, but I think largely because both to the research community, we don't want a list of journal that isn't predatory in our journal, and then also for our sake, we don't want to do that. So we, kind of through. And in terms of this, differentiating the severity, I think, those again, a lot of what we were able to understand from that was bolstered by the FTC suit of omics. So a lot of the documented predatory activity that was just, repeated, systematic, mostly revolving around fees, or the kind of stealing, if you will, of work, legitimate work from an unknowing researcher, and kind of not, publishing it and not releasing it to protect work and the fees, those are probably the center of the more severe violations, those that focus on kind of taking this research and not giving it back unless some form of money is paid. Those are kind of the most identifiable and egregious, that kind of are the center of the more severe, I think, violations. So hope in there was a helpful info.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. The next question that we have is also about the criteria. And this says, I saw one of the criteria for a predatory journal might be a fake ISSN. If I search by ISSN, would that journal come up if it's fake? Does the system flag the fake ISSN as fake?
That's a great question. And no, that's a great question. So basically, so here we have, now, like I said, about 60%, this is a rough figure I'll just click on a few. When at all possible, we want to have it. If the journal claims one, right here. If a journal claims an ISSN, we include it. We do not check. Now, in some cases, I'm going to search the word hijacked only because we will see we have journals designated as hijacked. That means either in some cases, the ISSN, in some cases, the URL to the website, in some cases, the title has basically been stolen, hijacked from a legitimate journal. This is an extreme case of this, where we actually had this journal, this top journal, the legitimate version of this journal listed in Journalytics. So it was a particularly damning. If you Googled this journal title, the predatory hijack journal came up first. I actually met these publishers at a conference last year, and they've been able to do a lot of work to prevent this, to combat this. But I say this to say, in this case, it was the title of the journal. I don't think the ISSN, but that might, some of these hijacked journals, they are quote unquote hijacked because the ISSN was copied, stolen. But in other cases, we do not, monitor whether ISSNs that we're including are legitimate or not. I think maybe the main reason for that is, like I mentioned earlier, all a journal has to show is that they published something. It could be complete garbage, but if they can show that they've published something, when they can apply for an ISSN, the ISSN organization, they're not checking the legitimacy of this work. I think now there might be more to it than just checking, okay, they've published something. There might be some, effort to not just hand them out, but it's really any journal can apply for and get an ISSN. So having one doesn't mean it's legitimate, So we find in many cases, these are legitimate ISSN. So if we were to look up in the majority of cases on predatory reports, if we were to look up these ISSNs that we're finding, they would be legitimate and to this publication. So that, you know, might leads one to believe, oh, okay, it's got an ISSN, but that does not mean it's legitimate. Now, we include that for really identification purposes. But that's an interesting, that's a very interesting point that you make, because I'm now just kind of thinking if there is a way for us to easily determine if this is actually made up and or stolen or legitimate, this ISSN. You know, knowing that might be helpful. I don't know. You know, our evaluators are evaluating these journals. They're doing hands-on evaluations. So they're on this journal. They're on this. It is probably, I'm not exactly sure of the complete process. It's probably not that much additional work for them to check this ISSN. And I believe that would just be visiting the ISSN site, and you can look them up. So I will actually bring that up. We have Friday meetings every week with our journals team. And that's a good, but to answer your question, no. We are just put whatever, so where's that journal? So if they claim, if this journal has this ISSN down, we are just recording that. We are not checking to see if it's an actual real ISSN. I guess that, you know, even if it is, it doesn't mean the journal's legitimate. So I guess that's maybe why we're not doing it. But knowing that might be helpful. And if it's something we can do, you know, I guess maybe we would hesitate to put, you know, legitimate ISSN next to it because we wouldn't want to in any way legitimize the journal. That's a good question. So no, we have not vetted these ISSN to make sure they're actual legitimate ISSNs. So it could be made up, or again, the majority we see are legitimate ISSNs, you know, registered to this journal. So it might on the surface appear legitimate.